Hi, and welcome to another episode of eCom at One. And today's guest is Eli Schwartz, growth consultant, advisor, and author of Product Led SEO. How you doing, Eli?
Doing well. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. As an agency, we bought 7 copies of your latest book and passed them around the SEO team about 3 weeks ago. And everyone came to the same conclusion that we have to get you on the podcast. So I really appreciate you coming on. I know that the team are excited to listen to this one as well. So
thanks for having me. Thanks for reading the book. Thanks for having me. You know, I'm so happy you bought 7 copies. I think that's a pandemic feature. You know, if everyone was in the office, everyone would have bought one and taken turns, passed it around. So I feel like my sales of the book have sort of multiple of that.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, a lot of drop shipping going on around the world. Different home addresses and whatnot. Yeah, but absolutely sort of perfect book for the podcast, I think. So I thought we had to get you on. Obviously, most of our listeners are e-commerce stores that are all trying to optimize products and multiple products, and so very, very fitting for our listeners. So I think let's maybe get in at the start. So what events sort of led you to the creation of product-led SEO?
So I'm excited to dig into the e-commerce thing. I don't get to talk about that enough. I spend a lot of my time consulting with larger companies and really thinking through the strategies for them and like how they're going to create an acquisition channel. What led me to write this, it was I was spent years working at SurveyMonkey and I was incredibly successful building out an SEO channel for them. When I joined, they didn't have any SEO at all. I mean, it was you search SurveyMonkey, you found SurveyMonkey, you search survey, you found SurveyMonkey. But other than that, there was no strategic effort. There was no thought behind it. And I was really able to grow that into almost 3/4 of global revenue came from SEO by the time I left. And I achieved that not by going, following the typical best practices and tactics of here's the keyword we're going to optimize and here we're going to measure this with rankings. It was really about coming up with strategy and then maneuvering that strategy across teams. When I joined the company, there's 100 people. When I left, there was probably close to 1,500 people. So like became infinitely harder. And also while I was there, I had the opportunity to consult with some really great companies and to do the exact same thing. I might have had a single point of contact. Say that point of contact was even a CEO, and that CEO needs to convince a CTO who's not on a call. They need to convince engineers who aren't on a call. They need to convince marketing managers not on a call how to do SEO. And when you're doing that, traditionally, everything gets lost in the translation. Yeah. So I started putting these thoughts together while I was at SurveyMonkey and explaining to my team, like, how should they explain to CEO that they should stop freaking out about rankings? Or how should they explain to the CEO that traffic's going to grow and revenue's not going to grow? There is no instant gratification there. Or how should they explain that they're doing something that's not even going to be noticed for 6 to 12 to 18 months? So I started putting those thoughts down and it became a book. And, I'm thrilled to hear that you bought the book and that others are buying the book. Because again, I just meant to put thoughts down. I meant to like be able to explain these things. And a lot of the thoughts came from my own consulting and working with clients where they were having these questions about like, I would explain to how they should set up the website and they're like, okay, great. But where do we get high domain authority backlinks? And I just like slam my head on the table and be like, that's not the point. Which of this did you not hear? So I felt if I put it in a book, now I can have these conversations and I can say, you know what, why don't you read the book and let's have this call again next week. So, that's where it all came from. And again, like I said, I'm so happy that others are reading it and learning from it rather than it just being something that I can share and talk about.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So it came from a real need in your day job, in effect. And then like a lot of great ideas, I think it's just a case of putting it out there, creating it, documenting it. But if you were to sort of summarize what is product-led SEO, so you saw the need for sort of a new way of doing things, but what is product-led SEO?
Product-led SEO is hard to understand on your own. I know that a lot of listeners are they've never read the book. You've read the book, I hope, or at least your team has read the book. And a lot of listeners, this is going to be very new to them. So I think it's more important to really understand what product-led SEO is not. So product-led SEO is not the typical way of doing SEO, which is your listeners are e-commerce. Most of them are e-commerce. And I assume that you bought my book on Amazon. And I think we can all acknowledge the reality is that Amazon owns most of e-commerce. Now, and again, I assume the listeners know that. and they're not just going to, hang up their boots and say, we're done. We're not going to do SEO. Amazon has won. E-commerce belongs to Amazon, and that's it. We're just going to spend all our money on Facebook ads, or we're just going to put banners on bus stops. Like, that's not the way this works. So but again, they don't know an alternative way. So the way they'll do SEO is they'll try to chase Amazon. So they'll say, well, I'm selling this blue widget, and Amazon sells this blue widget, but I'm going to out hustle Amazon. I'm going to get better links. I'm going to have longer content. I'm going to go track these rankings, and I'm going to cheer myself when I get to page 2. Now, in reality, a lot of that effort is all SEO tactics. And in reality, a lot of that effort will never, ever pay off, because you're not going to beat Amazon, not on a grand scale. Maybe on a few terms, you'll get lucky. So product-led SEO is really the opposite. It's thinking of your SEO strategy as a product. What is it that you can build for a user that will make a user want to come to your website, that should make you want to shine in search? So if the other alternative to product-led SEO is content-led SEO, writing blog posts, stuffing e-commerce descriptions full of content, the alternative is thinking of SEO holistically, which is, I'm creating something, I'm putting it out in the world because I want search users to find it. How is it differentiated? How is it unique that a search user would want to find it? And think of it as a product. And that's why I call it product-led SEO, which is, it's not a piece of content that's optimized to 1,200 words exactly with a title tag that's 55 characters. You think of it as, again, well, we're in the blue widget space here. What do blue widget users need? They need a well-designed page. So how am I going to coordinate with a design team to build this? They need a page maybe that has some video description. So how do I coordinate with a video team? So it's not, again, just a piece of content, optimize a piece of content. It's a product. It's something holistic. And it, even better than a product, it fits into the grand scheme of the entire company and fits with the goals of the entire company. And that's one of the biggest challenges I've had with the way SEO is done in too many places, which is it becomes this individual silo. So with across every other marketing channel, you're really rigorous. You're like, oh, I'm going to spend, I'll say pounds for your listeners, spend 100,000 pounds on paid marketing, and I expect to return at a minimum of 100,000 pounds. Otherwise, I'm losing money. But suddenly when it comes to SEO, it's like, well, just write a bunch of content and, it's going to drive some traffic. But hey, looky here, we're number 3 on Google. Isn't that amazing? So like the metrics are not aligned. So when I think of product, you're creating something. It has to have product justification, has to have revenue justification, and it has to be good for the user. So it's more holistic than write some content, hope it ranks.
Okay. So maybe let's take an example. So for the guys that are listening in, I know we've got listeners that obviously sell all sorts of things, but I know one listener in particular sells barbecues, outdoor barbecues, outdoor pizza ovens. So in your example there, how, you're sort of saying, obviously we're building a product, but let's say bottom line is our listener and all of our listeners are quite similar in that they obviously sell these physical products. So I'm selling barbecues, I'm selling outdoor pizza ovens. How do they, what could they do? What would be the process for them to sort of follow your process?
So the thing, and like we'll go back to competing with Amazon there for a second. So the thing to think of, and I'm sorry, I apologize. It's been a while since I've been to the UK, and I don't know what version of Walmart you have in the UK. But think of Amazon as the Walmart. It's that you buy everything there. You're not buying. But if you are a barbecue person and you want a good barbecue, then you're going to go to a barbecue website. If you just want a barbecue, you're going to want to go to Amazon and buy all of your stuff, and you don't really care about anything. You want the number one selling barbecue, not even the number one reviewed barbecue. And there's too many reviews on Amazon or even fake. So now we're a barbecue e-commerce site, and you're going to take a step back and say, who is the customer that's buying a barbecue? Yeah. This is someone that really, really cares, because if they didn't care, they would go to Amazon. They would go to the physical store. Yeah. So what does that person that really cares want? Now, you may know that answer. And if you don't know the answer, you approach it the same way you build any other product. You go talk to the customer. What is it that you want? What makes you want to buy a barbecue? What tips you over the edge? What's the information you need to know? Do you need to know, is it sealed for rain? Again, Amazon's not going to touch any of these things because Amazon's doing everything at scale. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to go and find what are the commonalities between every product sold on your website that help people buy. There may be the best barbecue in the world, but that's not a fit for everyone. There is something that every single person is looking for. They want, maybe somebody cares more about budget, so they'll buy that other one, but there will be a commonality between every single product. Identify those commonalities, and then you build your page around that. What's the feature you're really going to promote. So yes, it is a product listing page. This is an e-commerce page, but the way you structure that page is around that selling factor for your customer, not the selling factor for the entire world. Now, that's the way I approach product, which is you're building something on SEO. Now, too often when people do SEO the wrong way, the trigger and the driver of their SEO efforts are keyword search volume. If you're selling barbecues for people that love barbecues, there may not be a ton of keyword search volume, but if you find that term, you find that topic that they're looking for, your conversion rate will be through the roof.
Yeah.
So you identify that, you build around that as a product, you build around those people as a user. That's what you focus on. There will be search volume. You know how you know there's search volume? Because you go and you've talked to users and they've told you that that's what they look for. And if it doesn't exist, if there's no search volume yet in any of the search keyword tools, then you know what? You found what I term in my book as a blue ocean. That's a place where no one is.
Yeah.
They know they want it. They're just not looking for it, because when they look for it, it doesn't exist. So they go look for that other thing. So the keyword research tools don't capture that nobody's looking for it.
There's a lot of stuff there, Eli. Let me just rewind. So there's no search volume in the tools, so it's a potential blue ocean. But what if it's not, and there's actually no searches? How do you know? How do you really know? So you've gone to your tools, you've searched for specifics. Tools are saying zero volume, but I think what you're saying is, obviously, if you've gone to your users, you've gone to your existing customers potentially, and asked the questions, then you're going to have data on sort of newer trends that are just starting, potentially newer keywords that are just coming through, or newer, not even keywords, actually searches around different phrases, whatever it may be. I mean, how do we define or differentiate between that blue ocean and actually know it's an absolute car crash?
I love that. Okay, so you're talking to users, and users will tell you that they're looking for something in particular. You kind of want to hear it from more than one or two users.
Yeah.
The way to do it at scale is, of course, is to put it in a survey. So again, barbecues, I'm a little weak on. I own one. I chose it because the price made sense and it fit in the backyard. But there is something for the people that love barbecues. And remember, these are your customers. Your customers are not going to be people that could just buy from Amazon. Where our expectation is that they don't care for the specific type of barbecue, they'll buy it, physically, or they'll buy it, somewhere. Like I know, I don't know if you have, I guess you have the website in the UK, but I'm sure you don't have the physical store, or no one has a physical store actually. B&H Photo. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I'm not. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So B&H Photo, it's a large store in Times Square. It's one of the largest online resellers or sellers of anything related to photo and audio online. They are obviously competing with Amazon. And I know people like they do podcasts, and they would only buy from B&H because B&H is not the Amazon of that. They're the place that those people care about you, and they're massive, right? So like barbecues might be a little bit smaller than the photo video space, but those are the folks that you're going after. The ones that don't just want to go and say, well, Weber's top rated and it's cheap enough, I'll just buy it and I'll have it in 2 days. They're the people that, okay, I want the grill that's tested in extreme rain. I want the grill that makes the perfect steak. I want the grill that has a smoker touch. Like, those are the people that are not going to buy from Amazon. Those are your customers. So you're talking to those customers. You want to know what helps those customers buy. Now, keyword search volume is only captured when it's done at scale. So if you can find those customers, those are your people. And if they search it, you will be found. And that's great because it's non-competitive. If there's no keyword search volume, you don't have all the SEO people going and creating content around it. You create that content, you will be visible. Yes, again, search volume might be low, but your conversion revenue will be very high.
Yeah, I love it. I think so many takeaways there. So, okay, so maybe it'd be good if you jumped into maybe a product-led campaign that you worked on over the last, I know you obviously have been working on a lot of big projects over the years. What would be a sort of standout project for yourself, and talk me through some of the things that you did that potentially, a sort of mid-size e-commerce store might be able to take some inspiration from and be able to do some of the things that you did.
I can't say I've done a lot of work with e-commerce. There's an e-commerce store I work with that they've been able to see, I think it was 10,000% growth, and they already had a very high base, and they used that to get to Series E and a multi-billion-dollar recent raise. that wasn't as product led as I like to say it is. That was really about being strategic about exposing the website to search, which is also good SEO. It was not about like, let's optimize title tags and e-commerce. They have millions of pages. They can't do all that. My favorite product led example is I was working with a company in the car rental space. And in UK, you call it the car hire space. So they're competing against companies that have been around as long as Google, Hertz and Enterprise and Budget, right? Those companies are really, really old. They are never, ever going to rank on car hire rental in airport, car hire rental in city, right? However, the reason that they existed was because they were a neighborhood company. That was the key value proposition of the company. That's why they got funded. That's why they have customers, not because they are in airports. However, they were going after just airports. So the product we created was, how do we feature that they have unique cars within neighborhoods? How do they feature the unique value that just this company creates? We restructured the entire approach to SEO, which, by the way, was the approach they were using to paid marketing. But somehow there was that and I find there's always a disconnect. On paid marketing, no one spends stupid money. When it comes to SEO, suddenly it's just like, well, the way you do it is you follow these 10 steps, and that's called SEO. We restructured and we had to restructure the entire website to really build after this approach. So our categories, instead of the categories becoming the typical categories within car rental space, which is the type of car, is it a sedan? Is it a truck? We restructured around the type of neighborhood, the type of key value proposition. Can you get a car with a ski rack? Can you get a car that has an extra seat? Can you get a car that you could put a deer hunting thing on the back, right? Like, that is the value proposition of the company. So that became the value proposition we went to market, we went to SEO with. So that is one of my favorite examples, because once they did that, there wasn't necessarily search volume for each neighborhood, but there was search volume when you rolled up every neighborhood in the entire country. And it is a company that is actually global, but when you rolled up every neighborhood around the entire world, yes, there is search volume. So my personal neighborhood might not be a top converting neighborhood, might not be a top search neighborhood, but if you take an entire city, that's a different story.
Yeah, so many options, isn't there? I think that's where, when you look at, like, just as you say, you look at the navigation on sites, you got a typical navigation, but people are always just looking for the, cat, subcat, sub-subcat. It's like the use of it, the different, when we go back to the barbecue example, you've got brand as a normal category structure. But no doubt, when we do the research, there could be categories out there and areas out there that are around, smoking your your food, or baking it, or I'm not that au fait with it. Although I say barbecues because I'm actually looking for a barbecue. That's why. But there's obviously different ways to filter other than the traditional, whether that's brand, price, size. There's others that combined can add up to obviously quite a decent search volume. So, okay, so
well, I think it's important to really, and this is the most important part of product led SEO, it's to be real with yourself about what your actual likelihood of ranking on what you think you're going to rank on. So if you think about the e-commerce space from two ways that websites will typically go after SEO. Way number one is they're just trying to out hustle Amazon. Come on. That's not going to happen. Let's be real about that. You may bleed off a couple searches, but you're not going to own your category against Amazon, unless it happens to be that category Amazon does terribly in. The second thing that the e-commerce sites do is they do a lot of content marketing, which my challenge with content marketing is you've created a blog post that's good reading. Is that the blog post that's going to help sell? Again, be real with yourself. Typically, the ROI on those blog posts and the conversion metric that you're going to get from that blog post is they're going to read another blog post. They're reading for the sake of reading. Now, if there is a conversion intent from the reader when they read that blog post, unfortunately, the large media properties know that also. So I don't know how it is in the UK, but I know like CNN makes these listicles of top barbecues to buy. And wouldn't you know it, there's affiliate links to Amazon in those articles. So maybe they do that in the UK, maybe they don't, but they certainly do it in the US.
Yeah,
so you have CNN playing this game, you have the New York Times playing this game, you have all these authoritative websites. Is someone really going to find your blog? If you write like the top 10 barbecues you need for summer 2021, are you going to out hustle CNN and New York Times? Probably not, right? So like, again, it's about being real with yourself that the old way is probably not going to work for you. So you really want to be creative and find what's going to work for you. It's like, again, like you said, barbecue with a smoker. So I think it's really important to underscore that.
So obviously creating these, I guess, pretty substantial product pages, category pages, it's a lot more than just copy content. We've got a whole creative team there. What advice would you give to people listening in when they think, well, it's just me and my two guys or my small agency, how can they do it? Or what sort of, trying to create maybe a lot better than a standard product page might be a little bit more complicated out of the box with Shopify, Magento, a lot more development input, or where's the line there? And what advice would you give to people that are thinking, well, that sounds a bit too much work, or obviously you've got to do work to get the benefit, but what sort of people would you get involved, or how would you attack that from a sort of a smaller, maybe a 10, 15 man team as a whole company was 2 or 3 people in the digital team? How would they sort of attack that?
So I think there's a Ferrari version of this, and then there's the compact car version of this. If you're chasing the user and the user wants something specific, and unfortunately you're not able to do the 3-dimensional views and the deep dive into the barbecue to see what's under it, so you can't do that. Yeah. But you can offer that better content. You can create a product description that highlights what your buyers want, rather than the product description that came just from the company. I know in the e-commerce space, because everyone's trying to out-hustle Amazon, what they do is they take the company's description and they bulk it up. Like Google can see that. They're like, oh, you bulked it up. Let's just remove the bulk. Oh, it looks like it's the same as Amazon.
Same as everybody else.
Right. So you need to be creative about that. So I think everyone can be creative regardless of the size of the team. But what I will say is to your point about this is expensive and difficult. There was a company I was working with unsuccessfully. Many of the companies I work with, they decide they don't want to do this, and they don't achieve their SEO goals. They continue to do that old thing, and they grow 5 to 10% a year, and they don't really unlock this 1,000% growth. But this company I was working with, they said, you're suggesting is going to take 6 months. And what you're suggesting means we need a developer assigned just to this. We can't do that. I'm like, well, if you were to do that, you would be at least 6 months ahead of your competition, who probably also wants to do this. And actually, this particular company, their competitor did it first, because they sat around saying, oh, it's 6 months and it's a developer. So yes, this is hard, but if you do it, you've created a defensive moat around yourself. Yeah. You can be within that space, and Amazon will chase you. And again, you probably know this better than me with the e-commerce, but like there are places Amazon doesn't win, and Amazon is chasing the competition. So do you want to be in that space, or do you want to just be the one that is like, well, we're doing the same as Amazon, and we'll just hope whatever people somehow accidentally didn't click on Amazon, they'll click on us?
Yeah, no, I get it. So let's say the listeners have convinced their management, or they've convinced themselves to go down this new route. What tips would you give them to sort of really dial it in? So they've gone down the route, they've invested more into the product pages, the research, and the different types of content, and the user generated, et cetera. But then, okay, that potentially can become and will become the new norm at a point, or maybe, within that business. So then really just to go to that, that last little, the 80-20 of the 80-20 of the 80-20, that last 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% that can really make the difference. What are a couple of tips you would give to our listeners?
Don't worry about 100%. So if you are doing SEO and you've built these really good product pages and you've heard from the user, move on to something else. The SEO is not an instant gratification channel. And many, many times when I talk to smaller companies, I tell them, do not hire an SEO. Do not even focus on SEO. Go straight to paid marketing. Go straight to creating this flywheel of customer value. Go straight to building customers rather than investing in this channel and just hoping that it will continue to return users to you, because it won't. It will take a long time to really build it up, especially if we're competing against Amazon here. So I think the mistake that many will make is they'll hire an SEO person on staff, and now that person needs 40 hours of things to do. I don't know how many hours you work in the UK, but at least 40 hours of things to do. Now, what we've just talked about may take a few months, but once you're done, if you're only selling barbecues and you don't sell something else, there may not be anything to do. Realistically, you're not going to go iterate on the page before you have data. You may have set up all your analytics, right? There are a lot of things to do, but once you're done, don't add that extra 20%. Like, I don't know where you feel on core web values and page experience updates. Like, I think fast pages are very, very important for users. I think page experience is very important for users. Should anybody spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on improving their page experience because they think that their visibility on Google is going to go up? No, that's insane. So like, don't do that. Take that money and put it into another channel. Now, if your page experience is so low that users are actually dropping off, of course you fix it. But if your page experience is good enough, then good enough is good enough. And that's what I would say about all of SEO is like, once you've achieved this, there isn't a reason to, come in every morning and spend 8 hours a day doing something which isn't necessarily going to return value.
Okay. Love it. Love it. So those that are listening in, that are thinking, right, do you know what? Let's give this a go. Let's give this a go. But then they start to sort of approach the management, approach the person with the purse strings. What advice would you give them to convince, to persuade their management about sort of shifting from this traditional SEO structure, which no doubt they've spent years and years building, to the new product-led way?
Well, first of all, you always want to use data. So you want to say, here's what we've achieved to date. Now, assuming that this makes a lot more sense when a company's older and has existing traffic. If a company's brand new, it's hard to convince anybody to do something different. But say a company's older, you can look at all, and it depends who this is. If this is the SEO person, it's never going to happen. They're never going to go prove that they didn't do anything the last year. But realistically, if this was not the SEO person, this was a director of marketing that the SEO person reported to them, they can say, for all of the 40 hours a week, or for all of the effort we put in, how much did we really grow on conversions? Again, traffic is a totally different story. I know that if you've done a lot of content marketing, you may have grown traffic 50%, year on year. You may have grown traffic 50% week on week, but how did you grow conversions from the SEO channel by that same number? I find with larger companies that are going concerns, it's really hard to increment that number. You've created this baseline. You're doing what you're doing on barbecues. You're going to grow at sort of the speed of the internet. You're going to grow at sort of the speed of your own efforts, but there isn't that 50 to 100% growth unless you do something completely different and unlock new value. So I'd say the first thing you want to do is look at the old way and say, is that really working? Yeah. Are we driving positive value? The second thing I would say is look at the new market and say, and start using different terms. Instead of keyword search volume, look at total addressable market. How many people could buy a barbecue in the UK that don't buy from Amazon? How are we going to achieve that? We're going to build something to go after that. Now, SEO isn't necessarily going to be the only way, but like that's what you're going to say, well, there's this amount of people that buy per year, and this is what we should invest based on that. And this is our expectations of that. And when you measure, you're going to measure based on that of here's how many sales we could have. Here's how many sales we're making, instead of like, hey, looky here, boss, we're number 4 on Google for this term. Unless again, you generate value just from being number 4 on Google, that's not the metric you should use. So switch your way of looking at this. Look at this the exact same way you look at every other channel, which is for paid marketing. You look at, here's how many searches are having. Here's how many people are clicking. Here's our lifetime value. For brand, you're not going to, and I don't know if companies that you work with do brand advertising, but you don't do brand advertising if there's no potential users. So you look at what are the potential users, approach this channel the same way. There may be a lump sum investment you're making. What's the return we're going to expect from this lump sum?
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the TAM side of things as well. That's not something that gets mentioned ever. I think it's that total available market, understanding what that is out there in in the UK, in the US, or obviously if you're shipping worldwide, and if you know that 20% is Amazon, hang on a minute. Yeah, there's still 80% out there. Well, it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't mean that we're going to get 80% on SEO, but it means there's a whole strategy which SEO can be a part of to get a percentage of that 80%. Yeah, that's a really good, that's actually given me quite a few things to think about myself, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the important thing. SEO is just a part of that. Yeah. Instead of saying, and this is where I think this is a huge mistake that many make. And I think it's potentially the agency driven model that agencies only are focused on one aspect. But SEO should have it's one part. It should have the exact same metrics and KPIs that the rest of the business has. And you don't want to just say, well, SEO is different. It's a black box. So we're going to create new KPIs and new metrics.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's, I was going to ask you about metrics, but I think we've covered it off pretty much. Is there anything else you would add around sort of measuring product-led SEO strategy?
Conversions. It has to come down to conversions. And a conversion is anything that you think is justified from SEO. It doesn't have to be a dollar or pound conversion into a sale. It could be, if you're selling barbecue grills, it could be that it's people signing up to get your newsletter about how to grill, because maybe people don't buy grills during the winter. Yeah. So an SEO conversion might be, let's get someone's email address and then we can send them a promotion when it's time. So they just has to be conversions instead of, oh, hey, look, we got clicks or we got a ranking. It has to align to the business. If that's what you would do on a brand, influencer, I think influencer gets a bad rap, but influencer does make sense in a marketing mix if you have the right customer there. So, by now many have figured out how to use influencers. Figure out the same for SEO. Like, again, if you're using an influencer, you want to make sure, again, unless it's a celebrity and you just want to be affiliated with a celebrity, you want to make sure there's ROI on that investment. Make sure there's ROI on the SEO investment, and don't just chalk it up to like, this is something we must do.
Fantastic. Well, Eli, it's been an absolute pleasure. The time has flown by. I always like to finish every episode with a book recommendation. Obviously, your book, we will recommend that till the cows come home. But if you were to recommend any other book, what have you got? Any other books that you would recommend?
Yeah, it's my favorite book. It's not really an SEO book at all, but it's from Chris Voss. Don't Split the Difference. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator, and I'd say his approach to conversations I've used with my kids, I've used with my kids' teachers, I've used in business, and everything is really a negotiation. And I'd say, like, I've read many negotiation books. The reason I love his approach is because, other negotiators always approach win-win, but when you're negotiating with terrorists, there's no win-win. Terrorists want to kill everyone and you want to make sure everyone comes home safely. So you're negotiating to only win. And I love that. And that's really what, his book's about. Never split the difference. So you can't do a win-win. So I love the way of thinking about it. And I love the behavioral aspect to it. So of course, buy my book, but check out that book too.
It's one that has been bought for me and I haven't actually read it yet. Yeah. So that's been a big jog for me, because a very good friend of mine recommended it and got me it. And I've still
listened to it. I listened to it twice. And then once you've listened to it, like every good book out there, there's the slide share on it. Like, here's the 10 ways to negotiate. So once you've listened to it or read it, then you could look at the slide share and be like, that's a good reminder of how to do just this. But you need the stories first.
Well, thanks, Eli. For those that are listening, want to find out more about yourself, what's the best way to do that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I accept all LinkedIn connections. Just look for Eli Schwartz on LinkedIn. My website is elischwartz.co. Admittedly, I haven't kept it updated in a while because I put all my writing effort into my book, but I'm going to start writing more. And then the website for my book is Product Led SEO. And Wix was so kind to build me a really, really beautiful website. So check out that website and you can buy the book and get links to buy the book there.
Fantastic. Well, we'll link all that up. Thank you so much for being a guest on